The driveway was exactly 60 feet of poured concrete, a pale gray ribbon that I had designed to complement the sharp, modern angles of our home. As I pulled my sedan up to the garage, the automatic door hummed with a reassuring, mechanical precision. It was the sound of order. It was the sound of my life, or at least, the life I believed I was living until the moment the engine cut out. I sat in the car for a moment, letting the silence of the closed garage settle around me. The digital clock on the dashboard read 7:42 p.m. I was exhausted. The project in Dallas had been a marathon of structural adjustments and client meetings, a week of arguing over load-bearing walls and aesthetic compromises. All I wanted was the specific, curated silence of my own living room, a glass of cold water, and the familiar presence of Linda. We had been married for 7 years. In that time, we had cultivated a rhythm. It was a quiet rhythm, perhaps a bit detached in recent months, but stable. Linda had been spending more time at the stables lately, her interest in equestrian therapy growing from a weekend hobby into a daily ritual, but I had encouraged it. Everyone needs an outlet. I had my architecture, she had her horses. It seemed like a fair trade. I grabbed my briefcase and the small gift bag, a silk scarf I had picked up at the airport duty-free, and stepped out of the car. The door leading from the garage to the kitchen was unlocked. I turned the handle, expecting the scent of the lemon verbena diffusers Linda insisted on keeping in every room. Instead, I was hit by a wall of warmth and a smell so thick and alien it almost made me gag. It was an earthy, pungent odor. It smelled of wet straw, ammonia, musk, and something ancient and animalistic. It was the smell of a barnyard, dense and heavy, completely out of place in our climate-controlled, open-concept home. "Linda!" I called out, dropping my keys on the granite island. The kitchen was spotless, but the air felt wrong. It was humid. I walked into the living room. The furniture was exactly where it should be, but the Persian rug had been rolled up and pushed against the wall. That was the first visual crack in the picture. Why would she move the rug? "Linda, I'm home," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the altered acoustics of the room. There was no answer, but I heard a sound coming from the hallway leading to the master suite. It was a heavy, rhythmic thud. Clop, clop, scrape. My first thought was that something had broken. A pipe bursting? A heavy appliance falling? I loosened my tie and walked down the corridor. The smell grew stronger here, transforming from a background note into an overwhelming presence. It made my eyes water. The door to our bedroom was closed. This was unusual. We kept the doors open to let the airflow circulate. I reached for the handle. It was locked. "Linda? Are you in there?" I knocked. "It's Mike." "Why is the door locked?" From inside, I heard a low, guttural snort. It wasn't human. It was a sound I recognized from the few times I had visited the stables with her, a large exhalation of air through wide nostrils. "Just a moment, Michael," Linda's voice came through the wood. She sounded calm. Unnervingly calm. There was no surprise in her tone, no welcome back, no excitement. Just a flat statement of fact. "What is going on?" I asked, frustration beginning to prickle at the back of my neck. "Open the door." "You have to be quiet," she replied. "He is settling in. You have a very chaotic energy right now." "He? Who is he?" My mind raced. An intruder? A doctor? A vet? "Linda, open this door immediately or I am going to find the key." "No keys," she said softly. "I changed the cylinder yesterday. The old lock was too flimsy." I stepped back, staring at the brushed nickel handle. She had changed the lock? While I was gone for 5 days? The absurdity of it made me dizzy. I didn't search for a key. I didn't try to reason anymore. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, flooded my system. I took a step back and slammed my shoulder into the door. It didn't budge. It was a solid oak door, and she had installed a heavy-duty deadbolt. I could hear movement inside, heavy, shifting weight that made the floorboards groan. "Linda, if you don't open this door, I am calling the police," I warned, my voice rising. "Do not raise your voice," she hissed. "You will spook him." I didn't wait. I went to the garage, retrieved the small crowbar I kept in my tool chest, and returned to the hallway. The smell was now seeping under the door frame. I jammed the metal claw into the gap between the door and the jamb. "Michael, stop!" Linda cried out, panic finally entering her voice. I heaved with all my weight. The wood splintered with a loud crack. The new deadbolt held, but the frame gave way. With one final, adrenaline-fueled shove, the door swung open, banging against the interior wall. I stood in the threshold, the crowbar dangling from my hand, and my brain simply refused to process the visual information in front of me. Our bedroom, a sanctuary of neutral tones and soft linens, was gone. In its place was a stable. The king-sized bed was missing. The nightstands were gone. The expensive Brazilian walnut floor, which I had personally selected for its durability and grain, was covered in thick black rubber mats. Over the mats lay a scattering of sawdust and hay. And there, standing in the center of the room, occupying the space where we used to sleep, was a horse. It was massive, a dark bay gelding, easily 16 hands high. Its coat gleamed under the recessed ceiling lights. It turned its long, noble head toward me, its dark eyes wide and unblinking. It let out a nervous snort and stomped a hoof on the rubber mat. The sound vibrated through the floor joists. Linda was standing next to the animal, one hand resting soothingly on its neck. She was wearing her silk pajamas, the ones I had bought her for our anniversary. The contrast between the elegant sleepwear and the large, imposing beast was grotesque. "You broke the door," Linda said. She didn't look at me. She was looking at the horse, stroking its mane. "It's okay, Baron. It's just noise. It's just Michael." I dropped the crowbar. It landed on the carpet of the hallway with a dull thud. "What represents this?" I stammered, my vocabulary failing me. "Linda, there is a horse in our bedroom." "His name is Baron," she corrected me, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And he needed a home. The stable was too cold. He was lonely, Michael. You don't understand how sensitive he is. He gets anxiety when he is alone." I walked into the room, my shoes crunching on a stray piece of hay. The heat in here was stifling. "You brought a horse into the house? Into our bedroom? Where is the bed, Linda?" "I moved it out," she said dismissively. "It took up too much space. Baron needs room to turn around." You moved the bed?" I felt a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my chest. "Where are we supposed to sleep?" Linda finally looked at me. Her eyes were clear, terrifyingly clear. There was no confusion in them, no sign of a fever or a joke. There was only a profound, impenetrable conviction. "I sleep here, on the mattress in the corner." She pointed to a single mattress on the floor, pushed against the far wall, dangerously close to the animal's hindquarters. "Baron needs me nearby. If I leave, he starts to pace." "And me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Where do I sleep?" "The guest room is perfectly comfortable," she said, turning back to the horse. She took a sugar cube from her pocket and offered it to the animal. Baron crunched it loudly. "Or the couch. Honestly, Michael, I didn't think you would be back until tomorrow. We aren't ready for visitors." "I am not a visitor," I shouted. The horse pinned its ears back and took a step sideways. "Get out," Linda snapped, stepping between me and the animal, spreading her arms. "You are scaring him. Look at his ears. Get out." I retreated into the hallway, stunned. This wasn't a marital spat. This wasn't a midlife crisis. This was a complete collapse of reality. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I mistyped the number once before connecting. "Emergency services," the operator's voice was cool and distant. "I need police," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My wife, there is an animal in my house. A horse. She has lost her mind. I need help." "Sir, are you in immediate danger? There is a 1,000-pound animal in my bedroom," I yelled. "Yes, I think that constitutes danger." The wait for the police was a blur. I paced the kitchen, drinking water straight from the tap because I couldn't find a clean glass. Every few seconds, I would hear the heavy thud-thud from the bedroom. It was the sound of my house being destroyed from the inside out. When the patrol car pulled up, the flashing lights washed across the front lawn. 2 officers approached the door, looking wary. I met them on the porch. Mr. Andrews, the older officer asked. You reported a horse? In the master bedroom, I said, leading them inside. My wife has brought a horse into the house. She won't let me in. She's delusional. The officers exchanged a look. They followed me down the hall. The broken door frame was the first thing they noticed. The older officer touched the splintered wood. Did you do this, sir? I had to get in. I explained. She locked me out. We entered the room. The scene hadn't changed, except now Linda was brushing the horse's flank. The smell hit the officers, and I saw the younger one wrinkle his nose. Ma'am, the older officer said, keeping his hand near his belt, though not on his equipment. Ma'am, is this your animal? Linda turned slowly. She smiled at them, a charming, polite smile that I had seen her use at a dozen dinner parties. Good evening, officers. I apologize if my husband disturbed you. He tends to overreact. Ma'am, there is a horse in your residence, the officer stated the obvious. This is Baron, Linda said. She walked over to the dresser, which was now covered in grooming brushes and bottles of hoof oil, and picked up a red folder. She handed it to the officer. Here are his papers. He is my registered emotional support companion. I have a prescription from Dr. Aris allowing me to keep him in close proximity for my anxiety. The officer opened the folder. He looked at the papers, then at the horse, then at me. This is a residential zone, I argued. You can't keep livestock in a bedroom. Look at the floor. Look at the sanitation. The Americans with Disabilities Act is quite clear, Michael, Linda said softly. Reasonable accommodation. And as for the zoning, he is not livestock. He is a companion. He is family. The officer looked uncomfortable. Mr. Andrews, the paperwork seems to be in order. It's unusual, certainly. But if the animal isn't aggressive. It's a horse. I pleaded. It weighs half a ton. It's going to fall through the floorboards. What happens if it kicks her? He would never hurt me, Linda said. He only gets agitated when strangers intrude on his space. She looked pointedly at me. The police officer closed the folder. Sir, this looks like a civil matter between you and your wife. The animal isn't attacking anyone. The lady seems calm. However, he pointed to the doorframe, you admitted to breaking this door. That's a destruction of property, technically. It's my house. It's marital property, the officer corrected. And forcing entry can be seen as an act of aggression. Given the tension here, maybe it would be best if you found somewhere else to stay for the night? Let things cool down? I stared at him. You are kicking me out? She turned our bedroom into a stable, and you are asking me to leave? We aren't kicking you out, sir. We are suggesting a separation to prevent further incidents. Unless you want us to file a report about the door? I looked at Linda. She was back by Baron's head, whispering in his ear. She didn't look at me. She had won. In the eyes of the law, I was the volatile husband who broke down a door. She was the fragile woman with her therapy animal. Fine, I said, my voice cold. Fine. I walked out of the bedroom. I went to the guest room down the hall to grab some clothes. I opened the closet. It was empty. My suits, my shirts, my shoes, everything was gone. I ran to the garage. There, in the corner, piled next to the recycling bins, were 6 large black garbage bags. I ripped one open. My cashmere sweaters were inside, smelling faintly of the garage dust. I stood there in the semi-darkness of the garage, surrounded by the debris of my life. I could hear the police officers leaving. I heard the front door close. Then, the distinct sound of the deadbolt sliding home. I went back to the interior door leading to the kitchen. Locked. I was trapped in my own garage. I sat down on the hood of my car, staring at the garbage bags. The shock was beginning to wear off, replaced by a dull, aching clarity. Linda hadn't just brought a horse home. She hadn't just had a breakdown. This was a coup. She had annexed the center of our home, and she had expelled me to the periphery. My stomach rumbled. I realized I hadn't eaten since lunch. I remembered the refrigerator in the garage. We kept it for sodas and extra supplies. I walked over to it, hoping for a frozen meal or at least a bottle of water. There was a heavy padlock drilled into the doors of the refrigerator. A thick, hardened steel chain was wrapped around the handles. I stared at the lock. It was new. Shiny. From the other side of the wall, deep within the house, I heard a sound. It was Linda, laughing. It wasn't a maniacal laugh. It was a soft, delighted laugh, the kind she used to give me when I made a clever joke. And then, the low, rumbling whinny of the horse responding to her. They were having a conversation. I retreated to my car, reclined the driver's seat, and locked the doors. The leather of the seat was cold against my back. I stared at the ceiling of the garage, listening to the silence that wasn't really silence anymore. I knew that just a few walls away, a 1,000-pound beast was sleeping where I used to dream. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I visualized the floor plan of the house. I visualized the load-bearing walls. I visualized the electrical wiring. I began to calculate. If logic wouldn't work, if the law wouldn't work, I would have to use the only thing I had left, my understanding of the structure itself. The stranger wasn't just in the bedroom. The stranger was the woman I had married. And she had just declared war on reality. I pulled my phone out and opened a new note. I typed the date and time. Then I typed, Item 1, retrieve financial records. Item 2, assess structural damage. Item 3, survive. The air in the garage was growing cold, but I didn't turn on the engine. I lay there in the dark, waiting for the sun to rise on a world that had completely, irrevocably changed. The morning sun didn't bring relief, it only illuminated the griminess of my situation. Waking up in the back seat of a sedan results in a specific kind of stiffness, a crick in the neck that radiates down the spine. I rubbed my eyes, checking my watch. 6:15 a.m. I needed a shower. I needed coffee. I needed to pretend that I was still a functioning member of society. I exited the car and tried the door to the house again. Still locked. I walked around the perimeter of the house to the back patio. The glass sliding doors were covered with heavy drapes, another new addition. I tried to peer through a gap in the fabric. The kitchen was visible. Linda was there. She was cutting apples. A massive pile of red apples sat on the granite counter, my counter. She was slicing them with a focused, rhythmic precision. I tapped on the glass. Linda. She didn't look up. She finished slicing an apple, put the pieces into a large metal bowl, and then picked up another. Linda, let me in. I need to shower. I have work. She paused, knife hovering over the fruit. She turned her head slowly towards the glass. She didn't unlock the door. Instead, she pointed a finger towards the garden hose spigot on the side of the house. Then she pointed to a bar of soap she had left on the patio table. It was a message. You are outside. We are inside. I stared at her, disbelief warring with fury. She returned to her apples. I walked over to the patio table. Next to the soap was a note, weighed down by a rock. It was written in her elegant cursive script. Michael, Baron is very sensitive to the smell of your cologne and the detergents you use. Until you detoxify your scent, you cannot be in the common areas. Please do not knock on the glass again, it vibrates and disturbs his breakfast. Eli looked at the garden hose. It was mid-October. The mornings were brisk. I stripped off my shirt, shivering as the cool air hit my skin. I turned on the spigot. The water was freezing. I scrubbed myself quickly, angrily, the cold water feeling like a physical assault. I dried off with a towel I found in one of the garbage bags in the garage, an old beach towel, sandy and rough. Dressed in a wrinkled suit from the trash bag, I looked like a scarecrow version of myself. I sat in my car and drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks away to use their restroom and shave with a disposable razor I bought at a gas station. When I looked in the mirror of the coffee shop restroom, I barely recognized the man staring back. My eyes were bloodshot. My jaw was set in a hard line. But there was something else, too. A coldness. I went to work. I sat in meetings. I nodded at blueprints. I discussed zoning laws for a new commercial complex. But my mind was entirely elsewhere. I was analyzing my own home as if it were a hostile fortification. At lunch, I called my bank. I'm sorry, Mr. Andrews, the teller said. But there is a hold on the joint account. A hold? Who authorized a hold? Your wife initiated a protective freeze this morning. She flagged some transactions as suspicious. Suspicious? I haven't spent anything. There was a large withdrawal attempt. Oh, wait. The note says, prevention of dissipation of assets due to substance abuse issues. I nearly dropped the phone. Substance abuse? That is a lie. That is a complete fabrication. You would need to come into the branch with her to lift the freeze, or provide a court order. I can't help you over the phone. She was cutting off my supply lines. It was brilliant, in a twisted, strategic way. She knew that without money, I couldn't hire a lawyer immediately. I couldn't rent a hotel room for long. She was forcing me to stay in the garage, forcing me to submit to her new world order. I left work early. I didn't go home. I went to the public library. I needed information. I spent 4 hours researching equine therapy laws, eviction of spouse, and involuntary commitment statutes in Texas. The results were disheartening. Texas law was complex regarding mental health commitments. Unless she was a danger to herself or others, an immediate, visible danger, it was very hard to force treatment. Owning a horse wasn't illegal. Being eccentric wasn't illegal. Even being delusional, as long as she could feed herself and wasn't waving a weapon, was often protected as civil liberty. I needed proof of danger. I drove back to the house as the sun was setting. The garage door opened. I pulled in. The silence was waiting for me. I crept to the interior door. I listened. I heard voices. Yes, he's just wonderful, isn't he? He loves the rubber flooring. It's much better for his joints than the concrete at the stable. Linda was on the phone. Oh, Michael? No, Michael is having a hard time. He's struggling with some personal demons. I'm trying to be supportive, but I have to protect my space. And barren space. Negative energy is so contagious. She was poisoning the well. She was telling our friends, her family, maybe even my family, that I was the problem. That I was the one who was unstable. I realized then that she wasn't just protecting the horse. She was replacing me. The horse was the new husband, silent, accepting, needing her constantly. I was the old appliance that didn't work anymore. I went to the stack of garbage bags. I found my toolbox. I took out a drill and a very small, pinhole camera I used for inspecting ventilation ducts. If she wanted to play games with reality, I needed to record it. I needed to show the world not just the horse, but the madness in her eyes when she looked at it. I spent the next hour quietly drilling a tiny hole through the drywall in the back of the garage, right where it shared a wall with the kitchen. I fed the fiber optic cable through until it poked out behind the refrigerator cabinets. I connected the feed to my laptop. The image was grainy, but clear enough. I saw Linda. She was in the kitchen. She was preparing dinner. She was making a salad. A massive salad in a mixing bowl. Lettuce, carrots, apples, oats. She carried the bowl not to the table, but down the hall toward the bedroom. I switched the camera to the audio feed. "Here we go, my handsome boy," I heard her say. "Dinner time. Michael is back in the garage. He's so loud, isn't he? But you are safe. Mommy has you safe." I sat in the dark garage, watching the waveform of her voice on my screen. Then, I heard a new sound. A scraping sound. I looked at the feed. Linda came back into the kitchen. She was dragging something. It was my expensive Italian leather armchair from the living room. She dragged it down the hall. "You can chew on this, sweetie," she cooed. "It's good leather. You like the texture." I watched as she fed my favorite chair to the horse. I didn't scream. I didn't pound on the wall. A strange calm settled over me. It was the calm of a man who realizes there is no going back. The marriage was over. The negotiation was over. This was a siege. I opened my laptop and started a log file. Day 2. Subject has begun destruction of assets to feed the delusion. Subject displays no empathy for human occupants. Strategy shift, cease resistance. Initiate surveillance. Gather evidence for total extraction. I looked at the padlock on the refrigerator again. I picked up my heavy-duty bolt cutters from the tool chest. I wasn't going to ask for food anymore. With a sharp snap, the chain fell to the concrete floor. I opened the fridge and took out a bottle of water and a sandwich. I ate it standing up, staring at the camera feed. I was an intruder in my own home. But intruders can be dangerous too. Tomorrow, I would stop being the victim. Tomorrow, I would start being the architect of her downfall. 2 weeks is not a long time in the grand scheme of a life, but it is an eternity when you are living as a ghost in your own home. The human mind has a terrifying ability to adapt to the unacceptable, to normalize the grotesque until it becomes mundane routine. I had established a schedule. I woke up at 5 a.m. in the garage, before the sun hit the metal door and turned the space into an oven. I washed in the garden hose, shivering as the cold water hit my skin, scrubbing away the smell of exhaust fumes and stale air. I dressed in the wrinkled clothes I had managed to salvage, and I left before Linda, or Baron, woke up. The house had ceased to be a home. It was now a biological organism that was rejecting me. The smell had permeated everything. It wasn't just in the bedroom anymore. The ammonia scent of urine and the sweet, cloying odor of hay had drifted into the vents, settling into the drywall, the curtains, the very fibers of the carpet in the living room. Even when I was at my office, miles away, I would catch phantom whiffs of it, a sensory hallucination that made my stomach turn. My strategy of survive and document was proving to be a slow, agonizing form of attrition. I was waiting for a mistake, for a slip-up that would be undeniable to the authorities. But Linda was careful. Her madness had a pristine, terrifying logic to it. She never let the horse roam outside where neighbors might see. She had heavy blackout curtains installed on all windows. To the outside world, the Andrews residence was quiet, perhaps a bit withdrawn, but normal. Inside, it was a kingdom ruled by a 1,000-pound herbivore and his keeper. The escalation began on a Tuesday. I had a critical video conference with the partners at the firm. We were finalizing the schematic design for the monolithic library project in downtown Austin. My career, effectively, hung on this presentation. I had set up a makeshift workstation in the guest room, the one room Linda hadn't fully annexed yet, though she had removed the bed to improve the energy flow. I sat on a folding chair, my laptop balanced on a stack of books, a blank white wall behind me to hide the chaos. I had locked the door. I had put a towel under the crack to dampen the sound. I logged in, put on my best professional smile, and began to speak about load distribution and natural light sources. 10 minutes into the presentation, just as I was explaining the cantilevered roof, the fire alarm went off. It wasn't a chirp. It was a deafening, ear-splitting shriek that pierced through the noise-canceling software of my microphone like a physical blow. On the screen, the partners winced, clutching their headsets. "Mike? Is everything okay?" the senior partner asked, shouting over the din. Apologisa, istamered, panic rising. False alarm. Please, give me a moment. I muted the microphone and ran into the hallway. The air was hazy, but not with smoke from a fire. It was talcum powder. Clouds of it. Linda stood in the hallway, holding a can of compressed air she used for cleaning electronics, spraying it directly into the smoke detector sensor. She wasn't frantic. She was methodical. "Linda! What are you doing?" I screamed, the alarm pulsing in my skull. She stopped spraying and looked at me with that serene, vacuous smile. Baron was feeling heavy. The air was too thick. We needed to clear the stagnation. "I am in a meeting. A partner meeting." "Oh, hush, Michael," she whispered, putting a finger to her lips. "Low vibrations. You are disrupting the cleansing." Then, she did something that froze my blood. She didn't argue. She didn't fight. She simply reached up and ripped the plastic cover off the alarm, exposing the wires, and then, with a quick, practiced motion, she yanked the battery out. The shrieking stopped. But the damage was done. When I returned to the room, the call had ended. A text message from the senior partner flashed on my screen: "We will reschedule when your domestic situation is stabilized. This is the third interruption this month, Mike. We need to talk about your focus." I sat on the folding chair, staring at the screen. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a cold, impotent rage. This wasn't accidental. She knew exactly when my meeting was. She monitored the Wi-Fi usage. She knew when the bandwidth spiked for a video call. This was sabotage. I left the house. I couldn't be there. I drove to a park and sat on a bench, watching normal people walk their dogs, watching children play. They seemed like a different species. I pulled out my phone to check my bank balance, intending to book a hotel room. I couldn't take the garage anymore. I needed a bed. I needed silence. Access denied. I stared at the banking app. I tried again. User account frozen. Please contact your branch. I called the number, my heart hammering against my ribs. After 20 minutes of hold music, a cheerful jazz tune that felt like a mockery, I got a representative. Mr. Andrews, yes, the voice was clipped, professional. We received a court order this morning regarding a temporary restraining order on assets. A restraining order? On my money? It's a protective order filed by Mrs. Linda Andrews. It alleges, let me see, dissipation of marital assets due to severe chemical dependency and erratic behavior. The judge has granted a temporary freeze to prevent you from draining the accounts until a hearing. The world tilted on its axis. Chemical dependency. She was accusing me of being an addict. That is a lie, I whispered, my voice hoarse. She is the one who is sick. She has a horse in the bedroom. Sir, I am just a bank representative. You will need to speak with your legal counsel. We have to comply with the court order. I hung up. I sat on that bench for a long time. The sun began to set, casting long, dark shadows across the grass. I realized then the scope of her plan. She wasn't just crazy, she was brilliant. She had projected her own instability onto me. If I went to the police now, shouting about a horse, I would look like exactly what she described, a paranoid addict ranting about hallucinations. She had the paperwork. She had the calm demeanor. She had the emotional support animal certification. I was being checkmated. That night, I didn't go back to the garage immediately. I went to an electronics store. I used a credit card that I prayed hadn't been frozen yet, a secret emergency card I kept in my briefcase. It worked. I bought 3 high-definition, motion-activated spy cameras. They were small, disguised as USB chargers and smoke detector facings. If she wanted to play a game of narratives, I needed undeniable, objective truth. I needed to show the world not just the horse, but the interaction. I needed to show the danger. I returned to the house at 2 a.m. The house was silent. I removed my shoes and moved in socks, creeping through the hallway like a burglar in my own life. The smell was overpowering at night, thick and humid. I could hear the heavy breathing of the animal from behind the bedroom door. It sounded like a large bellows, whoosh, huff, whoosh, huff. I installed the first camera in the hallway, aimed directly at the bedroom door. I installed the second in the living room. The third, the most risky one, I placed in the kitchen, hidden in a pile of cookbooks on the top shelf, angled to capture the hallway entrance. I retreated to the garage, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would wake the neighbors. I opened my laptop and connected to the feeds. The images were crisp, black and white infrared. I saw the empty hallway. I saw the living room with the rolled-up rug. I waited. For 3 nights, I watched. I slept in shifts, waking up every hour to check the recordings. I saw nothing but Linda bringing buckets of water into the room, or carrying out bags of manure which she piled in the guest bathroom bathtub, another horror I had discovered but was too numb to react to. But on the 4th night, the camera in the hallway captured something that changed everything. It was 3:17 a.m. The bedroom door opened. Linda stepped out. She was wearing a riding helmet. Inside the house. And she held a crop, a short, leather riding whip. She led Baron out into the hallway. The horse's hooves were wrapped in thick towels, muffled. That's why I hadn't heard them roaming at night. She had silenced him. They moved into the living room. I watched on my screen, breath held tight in my chest. She moved the coffee table aside. The space was tight, but enough for the animal to turn. Then, the training began. It wasn't normal dressage. It wasn't simple commands. Linda stood in front of the horse. She held up a picture. The camera resolution wasn't high enough to see the photo clearly, but it was a large, printed headshot. She held it in front of the horse's face. Then, she made a sound. A sharp, guttural hiss. Tsjjjjtt. She tapped the horse on the chest with the crop. Baron reared. It was a terrifying display of power. The animal went up on its hind legs, its front hooves slashing the air, inches from the ceiling fan. "Good boy," I heard her whisper through the camera's microphone. "Good protector." She lowered the picture. She gave him a sugar cube. Then she did it again. She held up the picture. She hissed. The horse reared and struck out with its front hooves, aiming at the space where the picture was. I zoomed in on the video feed. I tried to enhance the image of the photo she was holding. It was pixelated, grainy. But as she turned to place it on the sofa, the light from the street lamp outside caught it. It was my face. It was a printout of my LinkedIn profile picture. The same smiling face I had used for the firm's website. She wasn't just living with the horse. She was weaponizing it. She was conditioning a 1,000-pound animal to attack the visual of my face upon a specific auditory trigger. I sat back in the cold garage, the metal of the folding chair biting into my spine. The air felt suddenly very thin. This wasn't a divorce dispute anymore. This wasn't a mental health crisis. This was an assassination attempt in slow motion. If I walked into that house, if I tried to confront her, all she had to do was hold up a photo or point at me and make that sound. The horse would crush my skull, and she would claim it was a tragic accident. "He startled the animal," she would say. "Baron was just protecting me." I downloaded the footage. I saved it to the hard drive. I saved it to the cloud. I emailed it to a dummy account I had created. I looked at the time. 4:30 a.m. I couldn't stay in the garage. If she decided to bring Baron out for a training session near the car, I was trapped. I packed my laptop. I packed the few clothes I had. I grabbed the bolt cutters I had used on the fridge. I opened the garage door manually, disabling the motor so it wouldn't hum. I pushed my car down the driveway in neutral, the tires crunching softly on the concrete. Only when I was a block away did I start the engine. As I drove away, I looked back at the house. It was dark, silent. A suburban tomb. But I knew what was inside. I knew that behind those brick walls, a woman was whispering to a beast, teaching it to hate the shape of my face. I drove to an all-night diner on the highway. I ordered coffee. I opened my notebook. My hand was steady now. The fear had crystallized into something harder, sharper. It was the cold clarity of structural engineering. When a building is compromised, when the foundation is rotten, you don't patch the cracks. You don't try to save the paint. You condemn it. You evacuate the perimeter. And you bring in the demolition crew. I looked at the video file on my screen again. Evidence_01. MP4. She had trapped me in a web of lies and legal maneuvers. She had frozen my assets. She had destroyed my reputation. But she had made one mistake. She thought I was still playing by the rules of a marriage. She didn't realize that I had just switched to the rules of war, even if I couldn't call it that. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of the lawyer my colleague had whispered to me weeks ago, the one they called the Shark. It was too early to call, but I left a voicemail. "My name is Michael Andrews," I said, my voice flat and monotone. "I have video evidence of a premeditated plan to cause severe bodily harm using a biological weapon. I don't want a divorce. I want an extraction. And I want to destroy her credibility so thoroughly that she never leaves a facility again." I hung up. I drank my coffee. It was bitter, burnt. It tasted like victory. The trap had been set for me, yes. But traps have a nasty habit of snapping shut on whoever is standing closest when the trigger is pulled. And I was no longer standing in the blast zone. I was watching from the outside. And I was ready to light the fuse. The sun began to rise over the highway, bathing the world in a harsh, revealing light. I wasn't Mike the architect anymore. I wasn't Mike the husband. I was the witness. And the witness was about to take the stand. I closed the laptop. The screen went black. The reflection of my face stared back at me, the same face that Baron had been taught to strike. "Come and get me," I whispered to the reflection. The office of Marcus Vance did not look like a place where families were saved. It looked like a place where they were dismantled, piece by piece, and sold for scrap. The walls were glass, offering a panoramic view of the Austin skyline, but the air inside was sterile, filtered to a point of tastelessness. Vance himself was a man of sharp angles, a sharp nose, sharp chin, and a suit that seemed to have been cut from a material harder than wool. He watched the video on my laptop. The footage was grainy, the infrared turning Linda's eyes into hollow white orbs as she made the hissing sound. He watched the horse rear. He watched the hooves strike the air where my photograph had been. He didn't blink. He didn't gasp. He simply tapped a silver pen against his mahogany desk, a rhythmic tick, tick, tick that matched the beating of my own heart. When the video ended, he closed the laptop slowly. "It is theatrical," Vance said. His voice was dry, like sandpaper on stone. "It is disturbing. But is it actionable?" "She is training a 1,000-pound animal to attack my face," I said, my hands gripping the armrests of the leather chair. "How is that not actionable?" "It is a threat to my existence." "It is a threat to a photograph," Vance corrected me. "In a court of law, she will argue it is a game. A trick. Unless the animal actually makes contact with a human being, it is property damage at best. Menacing behavior at worst. Texas law protects the eccentric, Mr. Andrews. We have clients who sleep in coffins. We have clients who leave their fortunes to cats. Being deeply strange is not a crime. And neither is owning a horse, provided the zoning board hasn't issued a citation yet." "So I have to wait until she releases it on me?" I asked, the bitterness coating my tongue. "I have to wait until my skull is crushed before you can file a motion?" Vance leaned forward. The light from the window caught the rim of his glasses, hiding his eyes. "The law is a reactive mechanism, Michael. It responds to events. It is very poor at predicting them. If you want an involuntary commitment, if you want immediate extraction of the subject and the animal, you need an event. A critical failure of the environment. An undeniable breach of safety." He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the traffic crawling like insects below. "You are an architect," he said. "You understand structures. If a building is unstable, but standing, we leave it alone. But if the foundation cracks? If the pipes burst? If the walls begin to close in? Then we condemn it." I looked at his back. I understood what he was saying. He wasn't giving me legal advice. He was giving me a blueprint for demolition. "I own the house," I said quietly. "The deed is in my name. The utilities are in my name." "A man has a right to maintain his property," Vance said to the glass. "A man has a right to perform emergency repairs. If those repairs are disruptive, well, construction is a messy business. And if the environment becomes uninhabitable for a sensitive creature? If the stress causes a reaction?" He turned back to me. A thin, predatory smile played on his lips. "Do not initiate contact. Do not raise a hand. Do not threaten. Simply, exist. Assert your dominance over the physical space. Be the landlord. Be the noise. Let the cracks appear. And when the structure fails, and it will fail, be ready to record the collapse." I left his office with a plan that felt less like a legal strategy and more like a controlled demolition. Silence has a texture. Most people think silence is just the absence of noise, a void where sound used to be. But as an architect, I know that is not true. Silence is a material, just like concrete or steel. It has weight, it has density, and it has a finish. The silence in a library is dusty and soft, absorbing the coughs and the turning pages. The silence in a tomb is heavy and stone-cold, pressing down on your chest. The silence in my house, 6 months after the incident, was polished chrome. It was smooth, frictionless, and absolutely, terrifyingly perfect. It reflected everything back at you, undistorted and hard. It was the kind of silence that didn't just exist, it had been engineered. I stood in the center of the open-concept living area. The morning light poured in through the new, triple-paned windows. I had replaced the glass immediately. I didn't want the same glass that she had looked through day after day, waiting for her beast. I didn't want the same view that had been distorted by her madness. The light hit the floor, no longer the scratched walnut that had absorbed the fluids and filth of a barnyard, but a poured white epoxy resin that gleamed like a frozen lake. It was seamless. There were no cracks for dust to hide in. There were no gaps for secrets to fester. It was a floor that demanded to be clean, that rejected any organic imperfection. My arm throbbed slightly, a phantom sensation that came with the change in barometric pressure. The physical wound had healed into a jagged, pale scar that ran from my deltoid to my bicep, a permanent topographic map of the night my marriage ended. The doctors said I was lucky. The rusted blades had missed the brachial artery by millimeters. They spoke of miracles and close calls. But I didn't feel lucky. Luck implies chance, a roll of the dice. This wasn't chance. This was a calculated demolition. I had stood in the right place, I had provoked the right reaction, and I had accepted the structural damage necessary to condemn the building. I walked to the kitchen. The granite, too porous, too warm, was gone, replaced by brushed stainless steel. It looked less like a home kitchen and more like a laboratory or a morgue prep room. I liked it. It was easy to sanitize. I ran my hand along the counter. Not a speck of dust. The cool metal sucked the heat from my fingertips, a sensation that I found strangely grounding. The legal proceedings had been surprisingly swift, aided by the undeniable, visceral brutality of the evidence. The video file, evidence_01. MP4, had played on a loop in the judge's chambers, or so Vance told me. I wasn't required to be there. I was the victim. I was the man who had been stabbed while trying to perform emergency repairs on his own crumbling home. The narrative was simple, clean, and unassailable. Linda never stood trial. There was no dramatic courtroom showdown, no tearful pleas. The state-appointed psychiatrists were unanimous in their findings. Shared psychotic disorder, one report suggested, though the partner in her delusion was a horse, a silent accomplice. Severe dissociative break with paranoid features, said another. She was declared unfit to plead. The system, usually so slow and clumsy, had worked with ruthless efficiency to categorize and remove her. She was currently residing in the Cypress Creek Behavioral Health Center, a secure facility 3 hours west of here. I hadn't visited. Vance advised against it, though he didn't need to convince me. "You are the trigger, Michael," he had said, smoothing his silk tie in his high-rise office. "Your face is the enemy. It is the focal point of her trauma. Let the doctors do their work. You focus on rebuilding." And so, I rebuilt. Not just the walls, but the reality of my life. The divorce was granted in absentia. The division of assets was heavily weighted in my favor, considering the willful destruction of marital property and the physical assault. I kept the house. I kept the investments. I kept the pension. Linda walked away, or rather, was wheeled away, with nothing but her diagnosis and a suitcase of clothes she would likely never wear again. Baron, the horse, had been seized by animal control immediately after the police arrived. I didn't ask what happened to him. I didn't care to know if he was auctioned off to a riding school or put down for aggression. He was a dangerous animal, conditioned to attack a human face. He was a faulty beam in the structure of my life, a load-bearing element that had snapped, and he had been removed. That was the only fact that mattered. Tonight was the final test. The house was finished. My reputation, though bruised by the whispers and the rumors that always circulate in the wake of tragedy, was intact. I needed to seal the cracks in my social standing just as I had sealed the cracks in the drywall. I needed to present the finished product. I was hosting a dinner party. It was a small gathering. 3 colleagues from the firm, their wives, and the senior partner, Mr. Henderson. It was a welcome back dinner, a signal to the professional world that Michael Andrews was not a broken man living in a horse stable, but a successful architect who had survived a domestic tragedy with grace and resilience. At 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. It wasn't the old chime, which had been too melodic, too welcoming. I had replaced it with a soft, electronic pulse. "Michael. Good to see you, man." David, a junior associate, shook my hand firmly. His grip was a little too tight, a little too performative. His eyes darted immediately over my shoulder, scanning the interior. They were all doing it. They were looking for the ghosts. They were searching for the manure stains, the hoof prints, the holes in the wall where the beast had rampaged. They wanted to see the wreckage so they could feel better about their own mundane lives. "Come in, please," I smiled. It was a practiced smile, calibrated to show resilience but not arrogance. Let me take your coats. The place looks incredible, David's wife, Sarah, said, stepping onto the white resin floor. She hesitated for a second, as if afraid of slipping. Her heels clicked sharply, the sound echoing in the minimalist space. So modern. Did you redo everything? Everything, I said, closing the closet door. It was time for a change. A fresh start. You can't build a new life on old foundations. Mr. Henderson walked in last. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect, the way one looks at a soldier who has returned from a particularly nasty front. He knew about the police report. He knew about the hospital stay. He had seen the dip in my productivity and the sharp, vertical climb that followed. "How is the arm, Mike?" he asked quietly, leaning in so the others wouldn't hear. "Fully functional," I lied. It still ached when it rained, a deep, dull throb that reminded me of the shears. Just a scar. Battle wounds, right? You're a tough son of a gun, Henderson clapped me on the good shoulder. Glad to have you back on the library project? We needed your eye for detail. The juniors lack your precision. The dinner was a masterpiece of control. I had hired a private chef. I didn't want to cook in the kitchen where I had once eaten sandwiches while watching my wife on a surveillance feed, decoding her madness. The menu was precise: sous vide salmon, roasted asparagus, a white wine reduction. Nothing messy. Nothing that required tearing flesh from bone. No red meat. The symbolism would have been too crude. We sat at the new dining table, a slab of frosted glass suspended on steel beams. The conversation flowed, guided by my careful steering. We talked about interest rates. We talked about the zoning changes in downtown. We talked about the new art museum. Nobody mentioned Linda. Her name was a void in the room, a black hole that everyone carefully orbited, terrified of the gravity. But halfway through the main course, Sarah, who had had 2 glasses of Chardonnay and possessed a morbid curiosity she couldn't suppress, leaned forward. "So, Mike," she started, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Is it true? About the animal?" David kicked her under the table. I saw the table jolt and the wine ripple in the glasses. "It's okay," I said, placing my fork down gently. "We can talk about it. It's not a secret. Secrets are just structural weaknesses waiting to be exploited." The table went silent. They wanted the horror story. They wanted to be entertained by my trauma. "It was a difficult time," I said, my voice steady, modulating it to sound reflective rather than angry. "Linda was very sick. We didn't realize how sick until she brought the horse inside. She believed the animal was a spiritual protector, a conduit for some higher energy. It was a tragedy. A mental health crisis is a terrible thing to witness from the inside." "But a horse inside?" Sarah pressed, wide-eyed, ignoring her husband's glare. "How did you live? The smell, the danger?" "I didn't live," I said. "I survived. I lived in the garage. Until she became violent." I let the word hang there. Violent. I saw them shudder. I saw the sympathy wash over them. I was the martyr. I was the saint who had endured madness for the sake of his vows, until he had no choice but to save himself. "Well," Henderson raised his glass, breaking the tension. "To new beginnings. And to safety." "To safety," I echoed, lifting my glass. We drank. The wine was cold and crisp, washing away the taste of the past. After dinner, I gave them the tour. I showed them the guest room, now a home office with built-in shelving and recessed lighting. I showed them the bathrooms with their floating vanities and motion sensor faucets. Finally, we stood before the master bedroom. The door was new. Solid core, soundproofed. It was a vault door disguised as wood. "And this?" David asked. "My sanctuary," I said. I opened the door. The room was sparse. A low platform bed. White linens. A single piece of abstract art on the wall, a black circle on a white canvas. No clutter. No dressers overflowing with clothes. No pictures of family. And certainly, no straw. "It's very zen," Henderson remarked, looking around the empty space. "A bit monastic, Mike." "I like the clarity," I replied. Clutter distracts the mind. Objects absorb energy. I prefer to keep the signal clean. They didn't stay long after that. The house was too clean, too quiet. It made them uncomfortable. They missed the mess of human life, the knickknacks, the dust bunnies, the warmth of imperfection. They felt like they were in a gallery where they couldn't touch anything, or perhaps a clean room where they were the contaminants. I said my goodbyes at the door. I watched their cars pull away, red taillights disappearing into the dark suburban night, escaping back to their messy, noisy lives. I locked the door. I engaged the security system. System armed, the panel chirped. I was alone. I walked back to the kitchen. The chef had cleaned up. The surfaces were gleaming. I poured myself a glass of water from the filtration system. I felt a strange vibration in my chest. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't loneliness. It was power. I had won. I had taken a chaotic, dangerous, irrational situation, a situation that would have broken a lesser man, and I had engineered a solution. I had used the law, the architecture, and the psychology of my opponent against her. I had dismantled her life to save my own. I had corrected the error. I walked down the hallway. My footsteps made no sound on the resin. I stopped at the spot where the hole in the wall had been, the hole Linda had smashed, the hole Baron had widened in his panic. It was smooth now. You couldn't tell where the patch began and the original wall ended. I ran my fingers over the paint. Perfect. Not a ripple. I entered the master bedroom. I didn't go to the bed. I went to the corner of the room, to the single leather armchair I had placed there. It was the only piece of furniture that wasn't white. It was black leather. It was the replacement for the chair Linda had fed to the horse. A monument to what was lost, and what was gained. I sat down. The leather creaked softly. The silence in the room was absolute. The soundproofing I had installed was industrial grade. No street noise. No crickets. No wind. Just the sound of my own breathing, steady and slow. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't look at photos of Linda. I didn't look at photos of happier times. Those were irrelevant data points now. I opened the audio files. I scrolled past the recordings of my meetings with Vance. I scrolled past the recordings of the police interview. I found the file dated October 14th. The event. I put in my earbuds. I pressed play. Screech of the drill. Thud. The high-pitched whinny of the horse. Linda's voice, "Stop it. Stop it." The sound of wood splintering. The chaotic clatter of hooves on the old parquet. "You did this. You monster." The wet, tearing sound of the shears hitting my shoulder. My own voice, screaming. I closed my eyes. I listened to it. I turned the volume up. Most people would find it traumatizing to relive the moment they were almost killed. But I didn't feel trauma. I felt validation. I listened to the chaos because it reminded me of what I had conquered. It was the sound of the dragon dying. It was the sound of the disorder being purged from my life. It was the necessary noise of demolition before construction could begin. Linda was gone. The horse was gone. The smell was gone. I was the only thing left. I looked at the black circle on the white canvas on the wall. It looked like an eye. Or perhaps a drain. I wondered, briefly, if I should feel guilty. I wondered if a normal husband would feel a pang of loss for the woman who had once loved him, before the sickness took her. I tried to summon that feeling, to emulate the grief I had performed for my guests. I searched my chest for it. I found nothing. Just the smooth, cool surface of the resin floor. Just the structural integrity of the walls. I was safe. I was clean. I was alone. And God help me, I had never been happier. I let the recording play to the end, where the sirens began to wail, signaling the arrival of the cleanup crew. Then I paused it. "Good night, Linda," I whispered to the empty, sterile room. I took the earbuds out. The silence rushed back in, heavy and final, sealing the room like a tomb. I sat there for a long time, watching the moonlight crawl across the floor, waiting for a ghost that I knew would never come, because I had built this fortress specifically to keep her out. The stranger was gone from the bedroom. But as I caught my reflection in the dark window, hollow-eyed, scar-hidden, smiling a thin, bloodless smile, I realized something. The stranger hadn't left. He was just the only one living here now. The hardware store was a sanctuary of potential energy. I walked the aisles with a cart, selecting my tools with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an amputation. I didn't buy weapons. I bought the instruments of home improvement. I bought a high-powered hammer drill, the kind used to bore through concrete. I bought a reciprocating saw. I bought an industrial-grade shop vacuum with a decibel rating that rivaled a jet engine. I bought ear protection for myself, heavy-duty shooting muffs. And finally, I bought a padlock. A heavy, hardened steel padlock. I drove back to the house. It was midday. The sun was high and unforgiving. The neighborhood was quiet, the manicured lawns sleeping under the heat. My house looked normal from the outside. The brick facade gave away nothing of the rot inside. I parked in the driveway. I didn't go to the garage this time. I walked to the front door. My key still worked. I turned it, the tumbler clicking with a satisfying mechanical sound. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me instantly, a physical wave of ammonia and musk. It was worse than before. The humidity in the house was tropical. The AC must have been turned off, or perhaps the animal's body heat was overwhelming the system. Michael? Linda appeared from the kitchen. She looked gaunt. Her hair was unwashed, pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a riding vest over a stained t-shirt. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "You're back," she said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "You can't be here. Baron is resting. The energy is very fragile today." I didn't answer her. I didn't look at her. I walked past her, my heavy work boots thudding against the floor. I carried my boxes of tools into the living room. "Michael, I am speaking to you." Her voice rose, shrill and thin. "You are disrupting the calm. Get out." I set the boxes down. I took out the earmuffs and hung them around my neck. Then, I walked to the utility closet in the hallway. "What are you doing?" she demanded, following me. She reached for my arm, but stopped short of touching me. She knew the rules. Physical contact changed the game. I opened the panel to the breaker box. "I'm performing maintenance," I said. My voice was calm, flat, devoid of emotion. "The electrical system is overloaded. I need to isolate the circuits." I reached up and flipped the main breaker for the HVAC system. The hum of the air conditioner died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy. Then, I walked to the water main access panel in the laundry room. "Michael, no," Linda whispered. "He needs water. He drinks 10 gallons a day." "There is a leak," I lied. "I have to shut it off to prevent structural damage. It will be off until I locate the source. Could take days." I turned the valve. The pipes groaned, and then the pressure released. "You are doing this on purpose," she hissed. Her face was contorted, the mask of serenity slipping. "You are trying to hurt him." "I am protecting my investment," I said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to remove the baseboards in the hallway. I believe there is mold behind them. Mold is very dangerous for respiratory systems." I walked to the hallway, the narrow corridor that separated the living room from the bedroom where the beast lived. I was 5 feet from the bedroom door. I could hear the animal shifting inside, sensing the tension. I plugged in the hammer drill. Linda stood at the end of the hall, her hands clutched to her chest. "Don't," she pleaded. "Please. He is sensitive to loud noises. He will panic. Michael, please." I looked at her. I saw the woman I had married, buried somewhere deep beneath the layers of delusion. But I also saw the woman who had fed my chair to a horse. I saw the woman who had taught a 1,000-pound animal to strike at my face. I put on the earmuffs. The world became muffled, distant. I pressed the trigger. *Brape. *. The sound was jagged, aggressive, tearing through the stagnant air of the house. The drill bit into the drywall, sending a plume of white dust into the air. Almost immediately, there was a response from behind the bedroom door. *Thud. The horse kicked the wall. The impact was so strong I felt it through the floorboards. I didn't stop. I kept the trigger depressed. *Brarup. Stop it. Stop it. Linda was screaming, but I could barely hear her. I saw her mouth moving, her face red with fury. She ran toward me, grabbing at the drill. I pulled away, turning my back to her, continuing to drill into the stud. I was the worker. I was the machine. I was simply doing a job. From the bedroom, a high-pitched, terrifying whinny erupted. It was the sound of a prey animal in a trap. Then came the crashing. The sound of hooves slipping on rubber, of a heavy body slamming against the walls. The house shook. I stopped drilling for a second. "He's going to hurt himself." Linda shrieked, tears streaming down her face involving dirt and dust. "You are killing him. You monster." "I am fixing the wall," I said, my voice raised to be heard. "Keep the animal under control, Linda. It's a residential zone. Noise ordinances apply." I started the drill again. This time, the reaction was violent. The bedroom door bowed outward as the horse threw its weight against it. The wood cracked. The lock, the one she had installed to keep me out, was now the only thing keeping the beast in. Linda looked at the door, then at me. Her eyes changed. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp determination. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the defender. She ran to the kitchen. I kept drilling, but I turned my body so I could see the hallway. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This is it, I thought. The failure of the environment. Linda returned. She wasn't empty-handed. She was holding a pair of heavy-duty gardening shears, the kind used for pruning thick branches. The blades were long, rusted, and open. She didn't come for me. Not yet. She went to the bedroom door. "It's okay, Baron," she screamed. "Mommy is here. Mommy is going to let you out." "Linda, don't," I said, lowering the drill. This was the variable I hadn't calculated perfectly. The hallway was narrow. If she let the horse out here, with me standing 10 feet away. "He needs to run," she yelled. "He needs to escape this energy." She unlocked the deadbolt. The door didn't just open, it exploded outward. Baron, the bay gelding, was a wall of muscle and panic. He burst into the hallway, his eyes wide and rolling, showing the whites. He was massive. In the open field, horses are beautiful. In a 3-foot-wide hallway, they are monsters. The animal slid on the parquet floor, his steel-shod hooves sparking against the wood. He crashed into the wall opposite the door, shattering the drywall and leaving a gaping hole. I pressed my back against the living room wall, holding the drill like a shield. The horse recovered his footing. He turned his head and saw me. Linda was standing next to him, grabbing his halter. "Get him," she shrieked. It wasn't a command to the horse. It was a scream of pure hysteria. "Get him out, Baron. Drive him out." The horse didn't attack. He was terrified. He reared up, his front hooves smashing into the ceiling, bringing down chunks of plaster and the smoke detector I had installed. The sound was deafening, a mixture of animal screams and breaking architecture. But Linda was the danger. She saw that the horse wasn't attacking. She saw me standing there, witnessing the chaos, the destruction of her sanctuary. She raised the shears. "You did this," she screamed, lunging at me. She wasn't trying to scare me. She was trying to prune me from her life. I had a choice. I could use the drill as a weapon. I could strike her. I could defend myself. But Vance's voice echoed in my head. Do not initiate. Do not threaten. Let the structure fail. I didn't swing. I dropped the drill. I raised my left arm in a defensive posture, turning my body slightly to protect my vitals. The shears came down. They didn't catch my neck, thank God. They caught my upper arm and shoulder. The blades were dull, which made it worse. They tore through the fabric of my work shirt and bit into the muscle. The pain was immediate and hot, a searing line of fire. I cried out and fell back, crashing into the coffee table. "Get out!" Linda was screaming, standing over me, raising the shears again. "Leave us alone!" Behind her, Baron, spooked by her aggression, kicked out. His hind legs smashed into the antique grandfather clock in the foyer, sending glass and gears spraying across the floor. I scrambled backward, crab-walking across the carpet. I wasn't fighting back. I was reaching into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. I hit the emergency button I had programmed. 911, what is your emergency? I didn't whisper. I yelled, clear and loud, ensuring the recording caught the background noise, the horse's frantic stomping, Linda's screaming, the sound of the house being torn apart. My wife has stabbed me. There is a horse destroying the house. I am bleeding. Send everyone. Linda froze. The mention of the police cut through her fog. She looked at the shears in her hand. She looked at the blood on my sleeve, bright red, undeniable, staining the beige carpet. You made me do it, she whispered, stepping back. You made me. Stay back, Linda, I gasped, clutching my arm. The pain was making my vision swim, but I forced myself to focus. Don't come near me. Baron let out another shrill whinny and tried to turn around in the hallway, his body wedged tight. The sound of ribs cracking against drywall was sickening. The animal was trapped in the maze she had built for him. He's stuck. Linda dropped the shears. She forgot about me instantly. She ran to the horse, throwing her arms around his sweating neck. It's okay, baby, it's okay. We'll get you out. I dragged myself into the kitchen. I didn't try to stop her. I didn't try to help the horse. I sat on the cold tile floor, leaning against the dishwasher. I pressed my hand hard against the wound on my shoulder. It was bleeding freely, warm and sticky. I looked at the camera hidden in the cookbooks. The tiny red light was blinking. It had seen everything. It had seen the drill. It had seen the door open. It had seen the attack. It had seen me refuse to fight back. I heard sirens in the distance. They were faint at first, then growing louder, a rising wail that cut through the humid afternoon air. I closed my eyes and let my head rest against the cabinet. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, shaking shock. The house sounded like it was dying. The horse was thrashing, destroying the framing of the hallway. Linda was weeping, a low, keen sound of utter despair. I had destroyed my home. I had provoked a mental breakdown. I had allowed myself to be stabbed. I took a deep breath. It smelled of drywall dust, horse manure, and iron. It smelled like success. The front door burst open. Not by a horse this time, but by officers in tactical gear. The blue lights washed over the hallway, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Police! Drop the weapon. Help him! Linda screamed from the hallway. Help my horse! Ma'am, step away from the animal. Step away. I stayed in the kitchen. I didn't move. I waited for them to find me. I waited for them to see the victim. A paramedic appeared in my field of vision. Sir? Can you hear me? I'm here, I whispered. She stabbed me. She lost control. As they loaded me onto the stretcher, they wheeled me past the hallway. It was a ruin. The walls were punched through. The floor was gouged. Baron was wedged, shivering, foam dripping from his mouth, his eyes wide with terror. Linda was on her knees, hands cuffed behind her back, her face pressed into the sawdust. She wasn't looking at the police. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the horse. I'm sorry, Baron, she was sobbing. I'm so sorry. I looked away. The stretcher rolled out the front door, into the blinding Texas sun. The fresh air hit my face. It was hot, dry, and clean. I lay back and let the paramedics work on my arm. The pain was there, sharp and throbbing, but it felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. The shark was right. The structure had failed. The foundation had cracked. And now, finally, the condemnation could begin.